Have the Detroit Lions had their pass rushing prayers answered? Over the last 24 to 48 hours, the NFL media has latched onto this idea that Von Miller, of all players, is the player to pair with Aidan Hutchinson, to be his pass rushing partner and bring the Detroit Lions pass rush back from the brink of irrelevancy. Now, the Detroit Lions last year didn't have a good pass rush. That was not a secret. They very rarely got to the quarterback, and despite being very high in the NFL in pressure percentage, QB hit percentage, and blitz percentage, the front four just couldn't quite get to the quarterback. They could get close. They could certainly impact the quarterback's throwing motion, put some pressure on the QB at times, but they very rarely got home and actually put the quarterback on the ground, particularly after Aidan Hutchinson's injury in Week 5. The all offseason, the NFL, the Lions fans, and really the NFL media have been calling for Brad Holmes to make a move, calling for the drafting of a first-round edge rusher, for the trading of Trey Hendrickson or Myles Garrett or Max Crosby, for the signing of Josh Sweat or another free agent in the market this season, and none of those things came true. The only real addition Brad Holmes made to this edge rushing group was signing and drafting 6th-round selection Ahmad Hassanin in the 6th round of the 2025 draft class. And while Ahmad Hassanin is certainly a productive player from a small school at Boise State, it's not really the player that most Detroit Lions fans and most of the media had in mind. Von Miller, a much bigger name, a much more proven commodity in the NFL, and certainly a player with a larger market, is what most people have in mind. And again, over the last couple of days, that is where a lot of people's focus has been. So today we're going to answer, should Von Miller be a Detroit Lion? Does he work with the Detroit Lions roster, with the Detroit Lions staff? And what could he potentially look like in this deal to come to Detroit? Well, before we get into that, let's back up to the beginning of the offseason, where Von Miller was released by the Buffalo Bills. With 3 years left on his contract, the Buffalo Bills felt Von Miller was no longer valuable enough to keep around at the price tag he was asking for. Just a few days ago, Von Miller said he is still very much intending to play in 2025 for his year 36 season and very much wants to play for a contender. He wants to get one more Super Bowl ring before he retires to really cement himself as one of the most productive and one of the highest achieving defensive ends in NFL history. Taking a look over his career, Von Miller could really not do a whole lot more throughout his career. At 36 years old, Von Miller is an 8-time Pro Bowler, a 3-time All-Pro, a 2011 Defensive Player of the Year, and a 2-time Super Bowl champion. He won Super Bowl 50 with the Denver Broncos and then Super Bowl 54 with the Los Angeles Rams just a few years later. He has won multiple championships, been to several AFC and NFC championship games, and really has been one of the biggest and most performative defensive ends in NFL history. Throughout his career, Von Miller has over 129 sacks, 170 tackles for loss, 250 quarterback hits, 27 forced fumbles, 9 fumble recoveries, 2 interceptions, and 2 passes defended. He was, throughout the 2010s, the best pass rusher in the NFL. He was named to the 2010s All-NFL Hall of Fame team and is just widely regarded as one of the best players in NFL history. When he ends up hanging up his cleats, he will most certainly make it into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, with the likelihood of him being a first ballot Hall of Famer. Von Miller's best days are certainly behind him. No longer is he the Defensive Player of the Year contributor. No longer is he an all-pro type of player, but that doesn't mean he's a bad football player. And I think that's where a lot of people look at old guys like Jadeveon Clowney, like Von Miller, like Zadarius Smith, and they say, well, they're not going to get any better. They're old, they're expensive, they could fall off a cliff at any moment. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad football players. A year ago, Von Miller, despite playing in a limited role in Buffalo, was still quite good. He played in 13 games for Buffalo, totaling 17 tackles, 7 TFLs, 6 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, with a PFF grade of 85.5 on the season. That ranks 11th among edge rushers at his position, and his pass rushing grade was an 84.5, ranking him 10th in the NFL at a pass rushing situation among edge rushers. He also graded out with an 18.4% in pass rush win rate, which was one of the highest in the NFL a season ago. And despite being really the designated pass rusher for Buffalo, not playing on early downs, not playing on obvious run situations, he still was quite productive, played just under 280 snaps and walked away with 6 sacks and 7 TFLs. To compare that to a player like Zadarius Smith a season ago, he played in just 255 snaps for the Detroit Lions, but only walked away with 4 sacks and 3 tackles for loss. So a more productive player than Zadarius Smith, but maybe a player that can't play on every single down, every single distance, in every single situation. That's kind of where Von Miller is as of right now throughout his career. Taking a look at the Detroit Lions pass rush from a season ago, it's no secret that it wasn't very good. Aidan Hutchinson led the team with 7.5 sacks despite only playing in 4.5 games. Zadarius Smith came in at the midseason, played in 9 games, started in 7, and had 4 sacks for the Lions in 291 snaps. Alim McNeill had 3.5 sacks before tearing his ACL against the Buffalo Bills. Aidan Muhammad had 3 sacks on the season after joining the team midseason as well, right around the same time as Zadarius Smith. DJ Reader had 3 sacks, including his 2-sack performance on Thanksgiving to help the Detroit Lions leap to victory there. Josh Paschal had 2 sacks on the season, Levi Onwuzurike had 1, and Marcus Davenport had half a sack in 2 games. There were other contributors, of course. Trevor Nowaske had 2, Malcolm Rodriguez had 2. Some of the blitzing safeties and linebackers had some production as pass rushers as well, but from the defensive line in particular, it wasn't very good. Aidan Hutchinson was on Defensive Player of the Year trajectory. Everybody else kind of failed in comparison to reach those kind of heights or even really quality starting type of statistics for a team like Detroit. Now, as a team, they were quite good. They ranked top 4 in the NFL in pressures, top 5 in the NFL in quarterback knockdowns, and they were able to get to the quarterback. They just weren't able to put the quarterback on the ground. Consistently throughout the season, they were putting pressure on the QB. They were getting the football out early. They were forcing errant throws. They forced turnovers to the safeties. And the secondary capitalized a lot on what the pressure that the defensive line was able to get. With that being said, it certainly could have been better. Their lack of pass rush really hurt them against teams like the Commanders with Jaden Daniels, the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen, even the Green Bay Packers with Jordan Love and some of the other more mobile quarterbacks across football. Those teams really hurt the Detroit Lions because of their lack of ability to put the quarterback on the ground, because of their lack of ability to end a play quickly. Mobile quarterbacks were able to get outside the pocket, able to make ridiculous throws down the field, and really able to hurt the Detroit Lions in ways that very few teams have been able to do over the last few seasons. Now, Von Miller, of course, would slide in and be the second best edge rusher on the team almost immediately. Aidan Hutchinson is, of course, the number 1 player. But outside of that, I think Aidan Muhammad is solid. I think he's a potential 4 to 6 sack player for Detroit. Levi Onwuzurike is a 2 to 3 sack type of player. Marcus Davenport, when healthy, is certainly a 6 to 8 type of sack player. And Josh Paschal is probably a 2 to 3 sack player. There aren't a ton of sacks to go around, with Aidan Hutchinson already taking a majority of them. But Von Miller would certainly help. Even in a designated pass rushing role, he could still have value, much in the same way that he had for Buffalo. He wasn't the primary first down stopper. He wasn't in on obvious running downs or obvious situations like that, but he did have a role, and that role did help the Buffalo Bills reach the AFC Championship and did help them see the success that they have over the last 3 seasons. The biggest concern here is that the Detroit Lions, and in particular Kelvin Shepherd, has been very outspoken about not wanting a designated pass rusher. They don't want a player that's only going to play on 3rd down. They don't want a player that's only going to play on obvious passing situations, because that essentially makes the other 50 to 70% of the game completely irrelevant to your position. That means that you, as a designated pass rusher, are almost completely useless on 1st down. You're almost completely useless on some 2nd down situations. And if it's a 3rd and short, you're never going to see the field. Designated pass rushers don't have the value for the Detroit Lions that they may have for other football teams. They like their players large. They like their 6'6", 6'7", traditional defensive ends. And that's not what Von Miller is. Von Miller is an outside linebacker. He's 6'3", he's 250, he's smaller, he's agile, he's quick, he's nimble, he's bendy, he gets around the edge instead of going through people. And that's always been his game. And especially being a little bit older, it's more technique based. It's more, being the veteran, having the, mental advantage over teams. That's where Von Miller really strives at this point. that just doesn't really fit the Detroit Lions. The power isn't there, the size isn't there, the early down ability isn't there, and that I think is the biggest issue for why the Detroit Lions both cut Zadarius Smith, but also will not sign Von Miller throughout this process. There are other players, of course, Von Miller being the most recent acquisition that's been talked about. You have Zadarius Smith, who's the most popular, Matt Judon, a former Grand Valley State alumni, so has connections to the Michigan area, DeMarcus Walker from the Chicago Bears, but overall, there just aren't a lot of good options left. And that's really where the Detroit Lions are going to struggle if they want to find an edge rusher. Zadarius Smith very much overvalues himself. He sees himself as a 10, 11, $12 million pass rusher. And after 9 sacks a season ago on the entire season, that might not be far from the truth. But for the Detroit Lions, that's just not a value they're willing to pay for a player like Zadarius Smith for what they showed him a season ago. Matt Judon, I think, is in a very similar situation, very similarly sized to Zadarius Smith and very similarly sized to Von Miller, just is kind of a pass rusher at this point in his career. And while he was an all-pro 3, maybe even 4 years ago at this point, he is still a valuable player, can still give you 5, 6 sacks on a year, but probably won't play on the early downs, probably won't be your defensive end so much as your edge rusher and your pass rusher, and those are two very different things. Jadeveon Clowney is the biggest and most physically imposing, who probably fits this team the best, but I'm not sure if his culture fit and really the way he carries himself is a good fit for Detroit. DeMarcus Walker has been very unproductive outside of a few key seasons here and there. As we talked about, Von Miller really is a pass rush specialist at this point, as not really considered to be a defensive end anymore. There just aren't any very good options for Detroit, and that is where they have tended to struggle. Do the Detroit Lions have a good player coming back? Absolutely. Does their defensive line actually look quite good with the players they have in place? I believe that it does, and I don't think sacks are everything. The top, sack getters from a season ago, the best pass rushing teams from a year ago, lost in the wild card of the NFC championship or of the NFC playoff games, right? Minnesota was the second best pass rush in football. They got blown out in the wild card round. Denver Broncos were the very best pass rush in football. They got blown out a season ago in the wild card round by, the Baltimore Ravens. The pass rush isn't everything, right? And the Lions have a really solid, really deep group on the defensive side. They were easily a top 10 defense a season ago without a true edge rusher, too, in quotes. And I think they're going to be okay. So while Von Miller is a big name, while Matt Judon, Jadeveon Clowney, Zadarius Smith are massive names for this team, they're not really the biggest needs. They're old, they're expensive, and they really just aren't the type of players that the Detroit Lions are looking for at this point in time. So with that being said, should the Detroit Lions sign Von Miller? I think for the right price. I think if he goes for $3-4 million, really takes a cheap prove it type of deal to be with the contender like Detroit, I think there's no harm in putting him on the team. If he wants $7, $8, $10 million a season, the Lions are pretty much going to stay far away from anything having to do with that. But you never know. The Detroit Lions have shocked us in the past. They just signed Zach Cunningham out of free agency a few days ago, so you never really know. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Let me know down in the comments below your opinions on signing Von Miller, your opinions of maybe signing a different edge rusher through free agency. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions in the comments down below. But with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.